challenges.
No, eight.
Six.
Six.
So we've had this conversation about church being boring. So, it's so off church school for kids is, I guess, it's a process that, because when they sit here, and I don't know if they get much from the pastor when he preaches or whatever. So the kids, and I know we're a small church, so, having church school, I mean, having a church sermon, maybe somewhere down the road, but, these kids these days, they have those discussions. But anyway, moving on. So, we, we talked about, what I was saying about that.
But before you go, she ain't in church yet. She ain't going to church
Yeah.
school. So your remarks about church, the sermon being, don't reach them. So what's happening back there?
Yeah,
That
was-
make them don't wanna go.
Yeah, that was the.
So that's, so it's not just, but, I just wanted to just clear that up. We used to have children's church at the other church. In that way, but they listen, they're listening to the sermon over in the Life Center. And then at the end of the day, before we wrap up, the teacher instructor back there will be, okay, what is the pastor saying, talking about? And working with them through the sermon, so that way they be engaging and everything. Then they come back in church and just give us one person only, just give us a view of what they gained from what they learned today and everything. So, that's the way that's why you have, a lot of churches have children's church along with church school as well.
We did that a long time ago. We did it when our pastors every day. So we don't have to manpower anymore.
Okay. Moving on into telling the Bible story. It says Thomas' name in Christian circle is associated with one impression, doubting and unbelief. Traditionally, this has negative tone, but can that be all there is to Thomas? That's the question. Could that be that Thomas should be given credit for having the boldness to express his revelation? So let's stop there and talk about those two questions. So traditionally, it's been a negative tone to be a doubting Thomas. But can that be all there is? And so to answer that question is no, it's not. Could it be that Thomas should be given credit for having the boldness to express his reservation? So, and I would say yes. So sometimes when we get into group discussion and that, so supposedly that fact has been given, and even if you have a doubt, do I raise my hand, do I say something? And I think we've been caught up into that. No, I'm just gonna go along with the crowd, So I would definitely have to give him credit for his boldness and to express his reservation, because asking those questions sometimes, like no question is a dumb question. So if you have a question, ask it.
Maybe some of the other disciples were probably feeling the same way Thomas was feeling, but they weren't bold enough to come out and say, what Thomas said. And that's just like a lot of times, we, as people, we're afraid to ask a question when somebody else may ask the question that we wanted to ask, but we were just afraid to ask it. And then we sit back like, oh, she asked that question, you probably felt the same way I felt.
So we're gonna jump right in. So you said that, you said the other disciples.
We have felt like Thomas.
Well, they did what they did. So in my readings or studies, the other disciples they were there and saw Jesus. They saw Thomas wasn't there. So that's why he had those reservations. Well, I didn't see it. I didn't see, the holes in his hands, the scars in his side. I did not see that. So he had the question. That's why
again,
he did not see. He was not there to witness.
And that's the thing, because
when you're out of place, just like most people in the church. Don't come to church school, don't come to meetings. And so when you're out of place, you don't know what's going on, so then you have doubts. See, they were all back at the place, and they were hiding from the Jews, but Thomas decided to leave. And when Jesus showed up, he blew on them the breath of the Holy Spirit, and Thomas wasn't there. So I didn't see it. So why? Because he was out of place. So it's not all Thomas had a lot to do with his failure and his doubting. Not that it's bad, but he placed himself in a lot of those positions, and we are doing the same thing today.
And also, in here, in the lesson, it says that Thomas, like our pastor said, if you're not in place, you don't have all the information that you needed as if you were there to get it directly. And Jesus rightly identified that there are people who must have solid evidence to attach credibility to an issue. So they have to have the evidence in order to believe. And that's what we do most times.
So it goes on to say, these people, to their credit, once convinced, hold their position when challenged. I mean, I think that can go either way. I mean, so if you're in that realm of always challenging, I guess once you get that position, I've challenged it, now I've got the evidence, then I'm good. That's what I think was the statement say. But sometimes, I think some people say they're always going to challenge. They're always going to challenge. I think, and when that term atheist, a person who doubts the evidence of God, they're always going to be challenging Christianity and the belief.
Go ahead.
Yeah, that's my take on that last statement there.
Where you at on the
That's page 51, left side, says at the very bottom. These people, to their credit, once convinced, hold their position when challenged. Moved up to
Okay.
yeah. So the people who believe easily also let go easily. They are always ready for the next height. And I guess I think that goes to the term where if you're on the fence, you're going, whatever comes, I'm going to believe this or believe that. And I think we have a lot of people in that situation, not even, and I guess moving out of the Christianity, anything what you believe in. Am I for it, or I'm against it, or I'm just going to be wishy-washy? Whatever someone comes up with that strong conviction, that strong statement, or to be able to that gift of gab, I'm going to believe this person because they can motivate me. They motivate me on what they're saying. It's believable, but is there any truth behind it? And moving on, the good news here is that God is gracious enough to meet us at our point of disbelief when the concern is genuine. When the concern is genuine, I looked at that genuine. What is a genuine concern? Is there? Do we want to miracles to happen right then, or let me see something that's physical to make me believe that this gospel this is of the truth. So that word genuine rings a bell to me. The concern, because some people just have privilege. They just make up things to okay, is this happening? Is this true? Can you do this? Can you do that?
But one thing about it, Mr. Felician, God knows whether we are genuine or not. We can't be wishy-washy with God. We can be wishy-washy with people, but God knows
I said, isn't that, what God did for Gideon? And I'm thinking, not a think, but I'm reading Judges 6 chapter 13, this is when the Israelites were being punished. And Gideon said, why you, I thought you were with the people, why you make them go through all this suffering? So he had to, I guess he questioned God's, you know, being with the people, why you doing this? And I think we all, that's what we all, when you're going through bad times, you know, like, well, why is God putting me through this? Why am I going through this? If, you know, if I'm a true believer, and I'm believing in why you put me through this. But, you know, I think there's always a reason why we go through certain situations.
With Gideon,
Remember, he was called to go and lead a group of people in the war.
he was making sure that
He was making sure that it was God speaking to him. And just like what we don't do, see, the first time we hear
something good that make
us feel good, we run to it. But what Gideon did say, Lord, if this really you,
telling me to do this.
then he said, well, I tell you what, I'm gonna lay a blanket on the ground, and if there's no dew in the morning,
Under the blanket, then I'll know it's you. So we have to, you know, look at that. He wasn't being doubtful. He was being genuinely concerned who was speaking to me. And that's something we don't do. We don't take the time to listen. I think Sister Brenda gave us a wonderful example Tuesday evening at a funeral. And the pastor got up and preached about tithing at a funeral. You know, so the thing is right then, if I were there, so this guy ain't about no, what he's trying to do is trying to recruit people now. Because when you don't see what it is that those are the kind of people, when they get the chance to preach in front of a whole bunch of people, they go all crazy and ballistic. And so they mess people up. See, you know, we'd be grateful because I would have probably gotten up and walked out. I'll tell you the truth. Because when you just, you know, you have to know if it's when God is and is not. Exactly.
And so, and that's, it brings the point up, if you don't know, you don't know. So the people who are in church listening to that, you know, that knowledge that they're getting, or the knowledge they think they're getting, you know, that's fact to them, I guess. So this knowledge is coming out. So, you know, you have to, I guess, learn for yourself.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
But I also believe that if you're gonna be preaching the gospel of what the Bible says, the person who's given false information is gonna be held accountable because stronger than the person who don't know. Because he's falsifying what the Bible says, the word of God.
Yeah.
And he probably knows he got people in there who don't know, so he's gonna say what he's gonna say. But he's gonna be the one held accountable.
And I think we spoke about, if you're a teacher, you're held accountable more than the rest of us, because you're supposed to be teaching
Thank you.
the right thing.
And a teacher can be like a parent too now.
Mhm, yeah.
A parent can tell a child something, and they know it's not true, but they just want that to work for that time.
Mhm.
They're gonna be held accountable because the child is gonna believe what the parent is telling them, but the parent could just be, saying something for that particular time to make it work, to make this point to the kid. So your teacher can be your parents or anybody who's giving the false information.
I smiled because about Zion did it when I told her about the Sunday school. She didn't want to go because I said, so you know, you have to be careful about the words that come out your mouth.
Yes.
You definitely do.
And they remember every.
Yes, they do. That's true.
I just like this, the bounty about Dr. Thomas, and page 50 where it says, talking about doubting Thomas, but people doubt, we doubt. And then that box that says, some encourage people to bring their doubts into the open so they can be addressed
if I have a doubt or question about something, it doesn't mean that I'm, trying to overdo your authority. Maybe you're saying something that you know, but I don't understand. So when I ask the question, that doesn't mean I'm trying to be defiant or something. And the rest of it says, others discourage addressing doubt, viewing it as a sign of rebellion and a challenge to authority. That's not, I mean, that's what it says there, but if you have a question about something, that doesn't mean that you're questioning authority. It just means that you don't understand and want something to be clarified.
And bring that to what's going on to our situation. Our administration says, we said, others discourage addressing doubt, viewing it as a sign of rebellion and challenging authority. So if we look at our administration, our government, whatever they say or whatever they do, they want that to be law. So to challenge that, you know, is a problem. And so we have to keep on challenging. We have to keep on challenging, and, you know, because if we know it's not right, or we think it's not right, ask the question, challenge that, stand up. You know?
Let's bring that closer to home. On your job, and you go to your superior and you tell them da 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 da, and you know deep down in your heart you think it's right, but then they look at it as a form of rebellion. Are you going against my authority? I am this and I am this. You know, you have no reason to question da 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 what I say or what I do. So some people do look at it as a form of rebellion when you doubt what they say, challenge what they say.
I'm a team player, you know, team player, you, you, you want to make things happen, but if there's something that's wrong, you have the right to bring that up, you know?
And like you said, in this let's use this administration, they don't want you to question anything that they do, although, you have free speech, just like they do. They always make sure they tell you you have free speech. I forgot which amendment, second, first amendment. But, and the first thing they will do is call you woke or something. Oh, that's one of the woke
Get
movement.
up my sermon.
But I'm just saying, I noticed that a lot. That's what they say, oh, that's one of them woke people. Anybody in that administration, the first thing they'll say, oh, that woke, that's to deter people from thinking for themselves and also getting off of them, the real situation.
Yep.
That's what they do, try to cause confusion.
Exactly.
And most times if you hold them, like what you're talking about, on the job, you're not trying to, you just question or you had something different. You can say, okay, is that's what our policies say? Because that could just be the person who's in charge, who just wanna do what they wanna do.
Yes.
And then you say, well, I remember our policies saying, our mission statement saying, you know, you can, not challenging them, but when they start doing that, you can say, well, this says we are all together doing the same thing, for the betterment of all people, you know, I'm just using that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A
It's
challenge
to
is
the
good.
subject, yeah.
Challenge is good.
But you have to
And so-
do something.
So moving on round down the lesson, talking about the Jews. So John, the 11th chapter, 14 verse, gives some further insight about Thomas's mindset. He was practical. He was practical. The Jews in the place where Lazarus had died were hostile to Jesus. Because Lazarus' death, Jesus decided to go there to resurrect Lazarus. It is unreasonable that Thomas was concerned for their safety. Again, this is consistent with a mindset that asks, what is the position based on? So, I'm gonna go back up. It says, is it unreasonable that Thomas was concerned for their safety? So, you know, and as we know, you know, Jesus' life has been threatened. So Thomas had a concern about them going to that place where to resurrect Lazarus. So he was concerned. He wasn't just gonna go along and just walk into, you know, any kind of situation. He knew what was going on, right? Right? You know? So that question is, what is his position based on? And on, moving on page 51, that question, almost at it says, what is that position based on? And looking up says, there were a lot of attempts on Jesus' life already. So that's why Lazarus was concerned about the situation.
Lazarus or Thomas?
Oh, excuse me.
But also, though, did Jesus tell him he was going to resurrect Lazarus? He said, let's just go. And he was going back to a place where there was a lot of hostility against him. And so Thomas knew, like you said, that they had already killed Lazarus. And so now he's saying, well, but look what Thomas said, though. He said, come, let us go die with them. So he was just saying that, we're going back, we know we're going back into a hostile environment. And so when you look at it from that perspective, Thomas had more, even though he was seen as a doubter, but at that point, he had more faith than the others. And something said earlier is what it is that it's your presentation, is how you approach the leaders and stuff too now. Because some of y'all can come with a real attitude, and the leader have to, you have to you have to capture yourself so that you don't respond the way people. So if you go to the leader and with understanding that, okay, let me put myself in that person's place. You see, but when we come, it's the same thing. Even though our presiding elder and I, we have a personal relationship, me and her, Sean and her husband, from our level of ministry and everything together. But I know how to respect her, not only in public, but even when she said, Rev Maxwell, yes ma'am. So, I need to ask you a question, yes ma'am. And I'm talking, and then when I need to ask her a question, I say, Elder, I need you to help me out with something that I said I'm sort of mixed up. I need to find out. For an example, we always knew that when we were doing the recording of the pastor's annual conference report that the church members were invited. But guess what? This year, no. It's just the pastor giving, not even the spouse. and so, things change, and so you have to make the adjustment. And so, but what it is how we approach the situation.
And with any organization, if you have that structure, it's easier to ask those questions, or if the leadership is doing something that you're not, liking, you disagree with, you have that structure in place to, like I said, sir or ma'am or elder, this what needs to happen. And in the military we have something that called tact. You have to, if your superior officer is doing something, you got to use tact to be able to approach him. You can't just go to him any kind of way.
Mm-hmm.
Use that, that approaching in the correct way.
I'm just using that as an example of,
Yeah. But think about like with Brother Cleveland Frazier. Y'all know, everybody know him. Everybody, when he get up to ask a question, everybody, oh Lord. But guess what? He's asking questions that's on everybody else's heart who were too afraid to even ask. And so what the bishop said, I like you. The Bishop Davis told him, I like you. Because what it is that any leader who's afraid to answer questions, there's something that there's, just like I said, and y'all said in the previous, in this current administration, we all don't think alike. And the same thing when Sean talked about, just like in the Republican Party, when they try to use it to Pamela Axe. Now we can ask Pamela Abbott how that worked out for her. That woke mob. She called a bunch of graduating seniors from college woke mob because they say we don't want to listen to you. So it is, it's just how you approach it. If she had approached them in a different way, they probably would have sat down, didn't have to agree with her, but listened to her.
So moving right on down, it says, therefore, before we jump on the traditional train and vilify Thomas, ask how reasonable his concerns were. Should he have just jumped and accepted everything everyone had told him? That's a question. Do you do that, or do you have a credibility gap that issues must cross before you embrace them? So I think that last question, do you think that, or do you do that, or do you have a credibility gap that issues must cross before you embrace them? So your leadership, or whatever's being, if you don't think they're credible, I think you have more questions. That's where the questions really do come up. But you have to know, you have to be steadfast. This is what I think needs to happen. So if they're not credible, I think after a while you know what's going on. If you're going, if the pastor's saying things that, oh, I don't believe what's going on. Is he credible? If my leadership, the principal's not, if he's not following the rules. So that credibility gap definitely plays a point on those questions and where they come from. Now, if you want to follow that person, because we got to follow principles, we got to be following the word, pastor putting it out, So that credibility of your leadership definitely makes a difference. And administration, definitely credibility is not one they're not credible at all. I'll put it that way. So moving on to the Sankofa. It says, the traditional view of Thomas led many church members to believe that asking for clarification on issues or expressing doubt is a negative trait. Do we believe that? It said traditionally that Thomas is, by him asking the question, do we believe that asking for clarification in the church situation is that a negative thing?
I think it was more of our grandparents and some of our parents' views. Whatever the pastor said, that's what they did. But now it's much more different. That you can ask a question and it should not be.
It should not be of doubting. It's for clarification.
Yeah, even for parents, it's like my father, mother, am I going to question what they say? That. So you have to be very. Be careful about how I'm gonna ask this question.
I remember asking a pastor something, expressing my personal view. He did not like that. I'm sorry, he did not like that. He held that against me for a long time. I was just expressing my opinion. And everybody get that, either it's right or wrong.
And me personally, if I go somewhere and I hear something that's so simple, and I know they don't know what they're talking about, I may not want to hear them again. That's me. But sometimes I give a second, especially if it's in a situation I have to be there, I'll give them that second chance. And then say, okay, maybe they had a bad day, they didn't study, they just said a little something to make the people, But me personally, I may not go to hear them again.
I guess it depends on that situation.
Yeah.
Are you bold enough to raise your hand right then in that audience or in that whatever situation and question them at that time?
Not when they're doing preaching or something.
Oh, no, yeah.
No. But yeah, if they're asking a question or something, I'll be like, please.
So, moving right on into the Sankofa, in the middle it says, for 2 years, Mr. Stropel carefully examined the evidence for Christianity with the same vigor he would have studied a legal case, but his findings amazed him. So basically, his wife was a Christian, but he was not. So those 2 years he was trying to prove that, let me find out if this is real. And after those 2 years, he said no, and the statement said Christianity, he found out that Christianity was not a hoax. So I guess the more, if you had a question, just like Thomas had the question he asked, the question was asked. He found out that, yeah, this is true. And so the same thing goes on with Mr. Scroper here. He did not believe in Christianity, and his wife did. So he followed his wife for those 2 years, asking them those questions, and after that, he found out, yeah, this is real. And he says that he became a Christian, one of the modern day apologists. So he, and again, we go to apologists, and instead of an apologist, a person who defends or explains a belief or doctrine. So that, after he had studied and found out that this is real. So he became I would say, he became a disciple, and yeah, this is what it's all about. It's true. Yeah. So I think I don't know if any of us has been in a situation where we had a situation where we didn't believe it, and after we studied or found out, hey, yeah, that is. And I think there's when rumors are out there, or we think it's a rumor, how do we find out if it's true? We have to find evidence ourselves, right? Because that hearsay get us in a lot of trouble, a lot of situations when we hear things that this person is doing that, or this, that. So we just believe that. Sometimes we have to have that evidence to I guess, nullify it or say, hey, that's true.
I should be glad when they finish finding this Northern Wells thing. Oh my gosh, I don't even want to hear, because it makes me mad. Northern Wells case, I mean, you hear all sorts of, even the people in authority can't come up with the right answers right now. It's disgusting, it's sickening.
Well, the reason why is because when you're lying, the authorities and everybody from the very jump when it came out, the first thing they claimed, it wasn't any foul play. Well, just like the recent, several years ago, the black young man here in Charleston that went on that boat trip across over there with a group of them white boys, and he never came back and everything. The thing is that we do our best to tell our children to be careful who you're hanging with, because everybody who claims to be your friend is not your friend. Those are the challenges that our people are facing today. What has happened is that we strongly believe that because we can go in the same restaurant with them, we can go in the same church with them, we can go all these places together, we can even married into their races. We have this false conception that we are accepted by them. And it's not so. It's proven to us every day. But what happened is God is allowing us to, like I said, man, stop arguing about Donald Trump and look at the good. The good, I said, yeah. The good God is allowing us to see who these people really are. That's all it is. You look at the good about how God, so I just don't pay him no attention, because if once God exposed the person to you, but why keep beating yourself up because they got to do all they can to make people believe in, just like that pastor you were talking about. Well, and there's a lot of pastors, as light as y'all take it, that have a problem with people asking them questions. I know some of them right from y'all church, and they struggle, and preachers and stuff, they struggle with that. But what happened is that because they got in their mind everybody's supposed to like them. If you stop thinking like that and realize that you're doing a job, a spiritual job, and you're not going to have everybody liking you. That's where we are stuck in. We want everybody to like us. That ain't going to happen. Yeah, when you tell people the truth, they get mad. of them even stop coming to church. When you start telling them the truth, they don't wanna hear that, but if you can hoop and holler and dance up in the pulpit for them, or they like that, cause they want entertainment instead of being educated.
Yeah, I'm glad you say that, because sometimes you go around and you wonder like, well, what did I do to that person? I've never done anything to that person. Why that person don't like me, da, da, da. And you get to the point like, well, I know I never did that, so, they got the problem, not me.
Exactly.
They got the problem, but you've never done anything to them,
And don't forget now, and some people are bringing baggage with them. Some people have some stuff that has happened to them in their lives that they never dealt with. And everybody they run into who did just any little thing can make that stuff rise up again. And it's true. That is very true. When we deal with counseling, if you ever really sit down in a counseling session, because our community have made people believe, ain't nothing wrong with me. I ain't got to go to no counseling. That's your problem right there. Because all counseling is another form of term called self-care. If you care enough about yourself, you will go to deal with it. They find somebody professionally who can help you take the time to seek out what it is that happened, something so that you can get over it and move forward.
Yeah, I'm saying, you've got those questions that you can't answer, that's definitely what a counselor is for. They help you, get to that, to your resolution, because they're not gonna give you the answer,
They
They're not
can't.
gonna- by talking, and you will come to that point that, yeah, this is where I need to be, or this is the direction I need to go. Yeah.
For an example, grief counseling.
Mhm.
We had a situation last week, and I just got in the building, and they called medical emergency. When I got up there on the 4th floor, the veteran had to be taken out of there and rushed to ICU. The ED, and then from the ED they took him to the ICU because he was very critical. And the next day, I saw the same young lady who was working on the 4th floor doing her job. And the next day, when they called in the ICU, the veteran died, and she happened to be there. And so after we did everything we were supposed to do, and I was leaving, and she called me. She said, "Sir," and when I turned around, tears were just coming out of her. I said, "What's wrong?" And I thought this guy was her family. She didn't even know the man's name. But what happened, she saw when he turned for the worse that day before, and then the next day she's on a different floor, he's there, and now she see him die. So when we sat down in the chapel, she started talking. Her grandmother was the most important person in her life, who died 7 years earlier. And she said the only thing in her was she thought about her grandmother, that she never had a chance to tell her grandmother bye. 7 years earlier. And so she was crying. I got up and got a box of tissue and just sat there and just, see, like a lot of times we think because you get preachers, the first thing they're gonna say, "Oh, the Lord ain't gonna pit no more." You man, get to. I know that happened to us when we had the bus accident at Trinity, and we in the middle of the hallway in the hospital. This man his wife just died, and this pastor came by and touched. We were there just in the huddle crying together, and he come and grab and put his shoulder, and the man called out, and he tell him, said, "Man, don't worry about that, McKee. God ain't gonna pick no more, and you can handle it." McKee turned around, and he cursed that pastor out. And then he came to me the next day, and he told me, he said, "Pastor Maxwell, I'm so sorry you saw that come out of me." I said, "No, you did what you needed to do." See, we go quoting scripture to people thinking so we can sound like we so spiritual. But there is a time when you just go and you just offer a ministry of quiet presence. Maya Angelou said, people will always forget what you said, but will never forget what you did.
Mhm. So true. Mhm. Okay. All right, moving on to the case study. 52. That says, doubt is not always bad. I mean, we discussed that. Doubt is not always bad. Indeed, Hank Davis, PhD, explained in his, in an issue of Psychology Today, why a little doubt is good for you. And it goes on to say, a point he made is how doubt promotes critical thinking. So when you have some doubt, that makes you, dig a little deeper than just taking that evidence and just going with it. And it said, moving on down, it says, seeking evidence is a great defense against becoming a blind cult follower in false worship. And we know our history in the United States, we've had a lot of cults being developed, and people just, following and doing whatever that person who's in charge, who's lead, saying to do. And that's because, no evidence, just believing what he says without no questions at all. No questions on, so we have to definitely question. And, I'm not saying that we have a lot of these storefront churches popping up, so, and these non-denominational coming. So when you follow that person, you believe in, because what doctrine they coming from? You have to find out all that.
That's how I used my niece Tanya, went to that church downtown, and that pastor was telling them all kinds of stuff, and doing whatever he said to do, whatever. She in the hospital, you ain't gotta take all that medicine, you ain't gotta do this, and you ain't gotta, what she had today, 27 years old, following what the pastor said. Mama lose her husband crying because what the pastor said, he won't be a husband. Now you without a husband, you without a daughter, because of a church, right downtown somewhere. Now where he at now, David?
What was his name?
I can't remember his name.
Where was the church located?
Somewhere downtown. Well, they kind of moved from one. They weren't always at one particular spot. They had moved. So I can't remember the pastor's name, but I don't like his name. I don't like his name. I'm sorry. I lose a niece behind him, and my aunt lose a husband behind him for the stuff that he been preaching and teaching them in that church.
Well, but the thing is that that's why, when you hear something, and if you are truly born again, the spirit in you is going to warn you that this is not real. And you don't have to fight them. When you feel that it's not real, then you get up and you go, and that's it. You see, there are many churches out there that's doing that to people right now. And so they go, many of our people have left our church and went to other churches. And I mean, when they tell you that they need to see your W-2 form, the scripture says that you give willingly, not out of compulsive, someone compelling you to give. You're not going to get blessed from that, but they still do it because the pastor say, I supposed to pay this much, and that's what I'm gonna pay. When you get people always saying the pastor say they got a problem, it's what the scripture said, what the word of God says. And the spirit of God in you will always agree with what the word of God has written. And so, and a lot of people do. We had this situation, y'all remember the Jim Jones? Those were good Christian people in Ohio. And that white man came up in their church, and he bamboozled them, and he even got them to the point where he told the husband, the Lord told me that I must sleep with your wife. And the husband took his wife to him. So by the time he had done brainwashed them, when he got them all over to Ghana and got them to drink that drink, their life were over with from there. Because they fell for that.
That's sad. Church full of people following you.
right on down, it says, in an age where misinformation is running wild, doubt triggers us to sift through what is presented to us to find what is real and wholesome. But, but that's an individual thing too, because if your foundation is not there, you're gonna just believe what what they're saying.
Yeah.
And where does that start?
You weren't
You know,
brought up
because
like
if
that.
you 18, 19, 20, so you gotta have that foundation at a young age, because you get out of high school and moving on to yourself, and this person comes out like, follow me, and you have no foundation nowhere.
They were brought up like that.
Mhm.
Brought up like that. Seeing people raise them raise me.
Mhm. So where do you think it went? What happened? What happened? Sometimes it only takes one question or one incident to make a person, I'm gonna check this out. And that goes with, even when it comes to homosexuality. I'm gonna check that out. That foundation, even if it's there, it's a possibility. And it goes on to say, people who discourage us from evaluating information must be viewed suspiciously. So if you got a leader just questions that looks bad at you about questioning them, you need to take a step back and say, am I really at the right spot? It's a disapproval of thinking is a red flag that what is presented cannot withstand reasonable scrutiny. So whatever that they're saying, if it can't withstand your questioning, and it's not based on anything that has a foundation, then I would say a reasonable person, but you need to walk away. Mhm.
I'll tell you, I heard my sons, they were with me yesterday, and I know my oldest son definitely.
You need to put the mic closer.
I know definitely he reads scriptures and all of that, especially since he went through that ordeal. But my youngest son, I was shocked. He said, Mama, we were talking about things that's happening in the world. And we were in a store, and we saw this one lady. She was a different race. But I said, but I know she must have a African-American husband or boyfriend, because we saw her child, but also the way she talks just like an African-American. The way we talk, she was, to look at her, you'd never know that, but when she was talking, if you close your eyes, you would have thought she was Afro-American. And he said, my youngest son said, that's just like in the Bible. And I was like, what? He was talking about the giants. I was talking about like in Enoch, like the giants who were they were doing things they weren't supposed to. They were, sexually engaging with other people who were not their people, and their nationality and all of that. And he just going on and said, everything I'm seeing now is coming to light. He said, because it's in the Bible. He said, and then he said, we hear what the preachers say, but when you go and read for yourself, and he said, I thank God I can Google. He had Google. He got it right there. He started reading, and then reading where he understood it in his language, not in King James, but like the regular English. And he said it just starting to pop off, so he continued reading now. And I'm like, that's all I could say. But when they find something that's not right in their mind, in the back of it, that don't sound right. That don't sound like something I heard when I was coming up. They question it. And I think a lot of people are starting to question. Younger people are starting to question, and younger people listen to other younger people. And some people who don't know, but they're not gonna tell you they've never heard certain things, or they weren't exposed to what you were exposed to. But they're gonna listen, and they'll say, well, that person is a good person. I'm gonna start listening to some of the things, because it seems like good things happening for them. And that's what I think people see, what we do, how we treat them, how we live. And so that, I think that's what's important, so the doubt won't be there. Just, you know.
Yeah, and so they got that foundation. Where'd they get that from? And then and the process, yeah, as the process, something happened or something that he heard, said, I need to go do some research, you know? Yeah, and that's what it's all about, is that a foundation. And I think, we, as a society, I think we just going with the flow nowadays, you know? And I think, someone was telling about the story, I think it's Tuskegee, how they got a rule now that you can't come to class with your pajama bottoms on, bonnets or do-rags. And then some people's like, well, that's racist. But the standard and I guess
But
structure.
Alabama, Tuskegee is a black institution.
I
So I mean, so
understand.
that person who says racist, you see how, and I say this not in a negative tone, but you see how they share their ignorance. Because it can't be racist if it's a black institution. What they're trying to do is get our children from thinking like that because we see them. Y'all see them walking through
Yeah.
Walmart and everything with do-rags on and pajamas, pants and flip. I mean, you know, that's, you know, so what the principal is doing, what the president is doing is changing the mind, trying to change the mindset.
Exactly. Yeah, so hopefully other institutions will do the same thing, because, you know, society, we need to have some kind of standard. You know, we just let people do, you know, what they want to, you know, especially, it's just, so I think it's a good thing. I think it is. Moving on to the life application, very end, it says, in the text, Thomas voiced his concerns so they could be addressed. Unfortunately, this is not the course of some Christians take. They drag secret doubts through life for years, allowing fears of looking stupid to block them from putting their concerns in the sunlight for answers. And I look back on that and said, when you have those doubts and you just hold on to them and go through, say, church life and not even asking, just following, to say, a tradition that we've been doing, why do we do that? If you have a doubt, ask the question, I would say, you know. But I take that from that statement there, you know, if you got these secrets and you got questions, and you just hold on to them, I'm not gonna ask the question, you know, because, you know, my parents did it, or we've been doing it forever. So if you have a question, ask it. You know, it may open up doors that, you know, that needed to be opened up a long time ago, you know.
And also, one other thing my son said, he said, you know, Mama, when people, like, some people just say, hey, you know, in the South, hey, good morning, how you doing? And then somebody might look, because they're not used, they may be from some other state, they're not used to people saying, greeting them or whatever. He said, sometimes that's all it takes, because somebody wants to feel like they are important. He said, because a lot of kids their ages, people don't approach them because I think they're afraid to. But sometimes if you just say, hey young man, how you doing, whatever. He said, because a lot of kids are killing themselves now because they don't have nobody to even address them or just acknowledge that they exist. And I was like, I never thought of it that way.
Well, thank you all for your participation. I think it's time to let the youth have their moment.
S-W-E, F-H-U-E. Okay?
Yeah, you want to tell them your name? Tell them your name.
M.
Yeah, right. And how old are you?
Same.
You almost 10.
I was the same.
How you tell them your name?
Ball baby. Yo, ball baby.
All right.
Ball
All right.
baby.
You did a good job, sweetie. I like that. All right.
Hi, my name is Diane and I'm 6 years old.
All right. the song. Good morning. Good morning, good morning.
How are you today? I'm fine, I'm fine.
All right. Tell me my lesson was believe in the seed.
Believe in the scene.
Okay, and who we talk about? Jesus.
Jesus,
And then how Thomas was the friend of Jesus, but did Thomas believe Jesus was still alive? No. What Thomas was looking for?
the hand.
Did we see the hand? The hand. Did you see? Thomas see the hand?
Yes.
Okay.
Mom.
All right. Thank you, sweetie.
Jesus told his disciples that his friend Lazarus, I don't know how to say Lazarus had died.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. Didn't have much children this morning, but we had fun. We learned about Jesus, the hand. So y'all be looking for the hand. All right. Thank you.
Thank our teachers this morning for lesson well 5. Thanks for the engagement of the lesson. We brought everything back to our everyday living. I hope that everyone have an enjoyable week. Let's stand and do our duties together. The Lord keep watch between while we're absent one from another. Amen.
Amen.
Thank our teachers, like I said.